Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast with Mundanara Bales.
It's about us as Aboriginal people, regardless of title.
You know, relationalism, not war making, is the best way to have security.
Now is the best time to be a black fellow, especially in business.
It's so powerful to see successful Aboriginal women.
I am a survivor of stolen generations.
I'd like to begin this podcast by acknowledging the Gubbi Gubbi and Cubbi Cubbi peoples here on the Sunshine Coast. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We have never ceded our sovereignty as First Nations peoples living in this country, now known as Australia. And in fact, Australia is the only English-speaking common law country in the world that still does not have a treaty with the First Peoples or an agreement of some sort. So I would say that by acknowledging traditional owners and acknowledging country, it's one way that we can ensure that our history in this country stretches as far in front of us as it does behind us. And by doing a podcast and engaging and yarning with different black fellas from all across the country, I get to learn about my culture, our culture, First Nations cultures all across the country. And it just, to me, I wouldn't want to belong to any other race. I actually love the fact that I belong to the oldest living continuous culture in world history. And why not showcase how deadly our people are, whether they're educators or in business or they're just doing amazing things in their communities. Black Magic Woman podcast is about how do we build relationships? How do we actually take that first step by getting to know each other? And then that, to me, sets the scene or like the platform to then do business. So who are you? And not what you do is most important, I would say, in Aboriginal culture. Who you are is much more important than your job titles. And when we build these relationships, it reinforces our humanness. So on that note, I would like to welcome my guest today on this podcast, Gina Williams. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to jump on the podcast today.
Hiya. Thank you for having me.
So, Gina, with all of the guests that jump on behind the microphone, I just love when you introduce yourself, when people tell their own stories. I think you would do a better job than I would at reading a bio. So would you mind telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, so who your mob is and where you grew up?
Sure. My name's Gina Williams. I'm a Balladong Noongar woman with links to the Gitja people of the East Kimberley. Noongar Country is in the southwest corner of Western Australia. I am Perth born and raised. I am a singer-songwriter. I'm a mother of three. And I think, oh gosh, what else? Can't think now. I'm not very good at talking about myself. I'm a product of a village. I was raised by four different families. I have biological family who made me. I have adopted family who chose me. I have foster family that rescued me, and I have another foster family that showed me really tough love, because by the time I got to them, I was a very angry, damaged little girl. And thanks to the village that rallied to raise me, I've managed to carve out a career first in media, and then as a musician, a singer-songwriter, and more recently I've been working with Noongar language. It's quite a rare language. There's 40,000 people that identify as Noongar, and of that, less than 1%, less than 400 people speak the language fluently. So it feels like that's my life's work. Yeah.
So you're still living in Perth on Noongar country?
Yeah. I love where I come from. I love my home. I love being on Noongar Budja, on Noongar country. I love serving my community through these songs and through storytelling and music, and sharing language with whoever will listen to it. And I've got no plans to leave.
Well, I'd say that, you know, when you meet blackfellas straight away, you can tell that we love country. We love most of us, I can't say we all because we can't speak on behalf of everyone, but it's like when you know your country and you've been back to your country, because a lot of us were removed off country.
Yeah.
And, you know, my family, I was born and raised in Sydney, and my mother was a ward of the state and her mother was a ward of the state. We go back 5 generations of forcible removals or stolen children. So my mother didn't know her country until she was in her 30s. And my nan identified as Indian. She outsmarted authorities to survive, to keep her children.
Yeah.
So she didn't talk about culture, and she sure didn't talk about Aboriginality either. And right up until she passed, Gina, it was like quite tense if you spoke about anything to do with culture. And now I know, because the fact that she was born Aboriginal was the reason why she was taken and suffered, you know, at the hands of authorities in those institutions, and then as a domestic when she was sent out to work. So I did not realise all of that trauma associated with her Aboriginality, and I'm only unpacking that now. And they're both passed. My mum passed at 45, and my nan, I lived with her and looked after her until she died about 15 years ago. And I've got her archive, so I've looked at those letters from her employers, and they were such, the letters, they were so cruel. How they wrote about children, innocent little children who have just been taken from their families, put into institutions, forced to work, 7 days a week, 12 to 18 hours a day in those institutions, and then out on cattle stations. And, who knows what, well, we do know what happened to them. A lot of things happened to them. They were vulnerable and they were targeted, and they were, abused and neglected. So my nan, was very quiet. We never, ever spoke about culture or country. But now with my generation, we've got the Wanneroo language in terms of a dictionary, and I know that, then that's my mother's language, the Gringo language from the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, just outside of Sydney. Mm-hmm. You fellas have got is it the Noongarpedia?
Yeah, there's been some crew that have been building a wiki, Noongar wiki.
Yeah. I saw it online. Yeah, and I guess that's a community effort. Like there's been a lot of people involved. Have you had anything to do with that one?
Oh, very early on, I had a little bit to do with it. I tend to do more about working in the arts, so music and writing books and releasing albums, and we launched an opera this year completely in Noongar language, no English, no other language, just Noongar. So that was a bit of a challenge. But yeah, there's lots of really cool stuff happening, and the Noongar language is, I think, a really beautiful language, and it's great to see it represented in lots of different ways.
I was just going to say, Gina, how did you get into music? Like, was it something from a young age that you knew that you was going to do, or did you know that you had a good voice or you could write?
No, I didn't. I was told I had no aptitude for music as a kid growing up. The West Australian Education Department used to do a music aptitude test, and I failed it 3 times. And, so I never had the opportunity to have any formal training at all. But my dad used to, he basically taught me to sing by listening. I sat on a blanket under the stars at night in summertime in Perth, and, my parents, we didn't have much. We had a black and white TV, but we had a record player that stacked records, and so I'd listen to music almost every night through summertime, and it was always something that we enjoyed. Music was always something that brought us everyone together, and then as an adult, I worked. I did a cadetship in journalism, and so I learnt to write and write very succinctly, and as a result, I ended up working for GWN, which is Western Australia's regional broadcaster TV station, and I worked on a program called Milbindi, and that program focused on the positive achievements of Aboriginal people in Western Australia. We never ran out of things to talk about, and in my downtime I used to just write poetry, and I didn't realise that I was writing songs, and then I used to sing my poems as a memory device, and I found myself with this collection of songs, and I left media, and someone said to me, "Why don't you enter this song contest, the West Australian Song Contest?" And I thought, oh well, I'll get some feedback about it. I didn't, think that it was just a good way to find out whether or not I was any good at something. And so I entered this contest and ticked the box that you get professional feedback, industry feedback. And they invited me to the awards celebration to sing. I couldn't believe it. And I went home with a prize. So I won. I was a category winner in the song contest, and suddenly people were ringing me up asking me if I'd like to come and sing, and then did 2 albums, and then I started working with a fellow named Ghouse, who's a phenomenal guitarist, and he and I were facilitating workshops, songwriting workshops out on country, and he used to say to me, "You should write songs in Noongar." And I'd be like, "I can't get people to listen to me in English. Who's going to listen to me in Noongar?" And anyway, he said, "Trust me, if you write language songs the way you write English songs," it hadn't occurred to me that I could do that. And I had a conversation with my Uncle Tom Hayden, who's a beautiful Balladong elder. And I said, I want to write songs in language, but I don't know what to write about. And he was like, "Oh, that's really easy. There's 4 things. Your court, which is your heart, your mort, which is your family, ngalang buja, which is our land, our country, and then kolanga, which is children, but it's more than that. It's about legacy. It's about, we've held this country for 3,000 generations. We want to make sure that we use present power to ensure that the next 3,000 generations come into a world that's kind and inclusive and good." And so he, that kind of really triggered something. And so Guy and I sat down with Guy and we basically spent the day. We wrote our first album, and the rest is kind of history. I always thought that we'd do this and we'd release an album, we'd get it out of our system, and that'd be the end of that. But Guy and I have been working together for close to 13 years now. So it's not going anywhere, and I feel really lucky to do what we do.
And I was just going to say the book by Magala.
Yeah, Kaliko Ngalak Waranka.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's basically based on those 4 principles.
Yeah, it is. And so it's a music book. It's sheet music and song sheets. And what I'm really interested in is seeing languages represented in ways that, when we see English, we take that for granted. So I can't read music. Like the ongoing joke is that I'm the Noongar foster kid who can't read music. And I love that we've been able to create this resource. We get a lot of requests right around the country for sheet music and song sheets, and and we're living in a digital age as well, where people are they're not getting CDs so much anymore. And I don't know about you, but I'm a bit old school. I remember as a kid, I'd be listening to records and I'd be reading the liner notes in the sleeve of the record, and then when CDs came out, the same thing. You'd have I'd be looking at all the booklets in the CDs and learning songs and listening and seeing who did what on people's albums, and there's not so much of that anymore because we've got these other platforms. And thought, well, if we had a songbook, people could still do that. They could have a resource in front of them, and people that a lot of our mob like to play guitar and play instruments, and this is a way that we can do that. And there's something really wonderful when people come together and they sing. There's like that kind of unison singing. I'm not talking about big choirs and, those convoluted sort of things, but when people come together and they sing, it's beautiful. And it does something to your heart. It shifts something in our spirits, and then it becomes something where we can connect. It's because this language, people think about it's a very Western way to think about difference, whereas I think with our mob, we're always trying to look for connection, and music is a great way that all of us can connect because we all call this place home.
I completely agree with you. I grew up in Redfern, and my grandmother, a beautiful storyteller and poet, her name was Maureen Watson, and she also was an actress. She was over in WA in the Aboriginal Black Theatre Company over there. This is going back now to like the 70s or 80s. So my gran started Radio Redfern, which is now Gadigal Radio, Koori Radio in Sydney. Yeah. And my dad would have been about 15 years old, 16 years old, and he was sitting in the studio with Gran, and he then was self-taught, and he learnt how to basically talk behind a microphone. So I grew up in a family that I would say radio has been a big part of our life. Community radio, Aboriginal radio, media. And when we came to Brisbane in the 1990s, it was so that my dad could take a job at Murri Radio, which is 98.9 FM here in Brisbane in West End. So I've grown up in a family where, music has been everything. And I didn't realise how privileged we were to have people like Uncle Archie Roach and his wife, Annie Ruby, who passed away a couple of years ago, Uncle Kev Carmody, Warumpi Band, Yotha Yindi, Coloured Stone, Midnight Oil, like all of these artists that would come to Brisbane. Well, first when I was, younger in Sydney, they used to come to our house and they would jam all night and all weekend. Then when we moved to Brisbane, same thing. My dad would pick them up at the airport, bring them back to our house, have a feed, they'd have a jam, and then my dad would drop into back to their hotels. So we grew up with all of the Aboriginal bands and a lot of Aboriginal musicians, not just playing on the radio, but actually in our house and kind of part of our family. So I feel quite lucky that I have been not immersed in our music, but I would say a lot of I come from a politically active family as well, so I guess when I hear a lot of the music, there's a whole lot of messages in a lot of the music that I listen to. But I also think, like, when I listen to people like Uncle Archie Roach or even Uncle Kev Carmody, like they're talking about times, like our history, some of our struggles, but also there's a whole lot of strength that you can get, by listening to their music, and it kind of fills my cup. And because my dad passed 6 years ago, every time I hear any blackfella music on the radio or even country music, I don't know what blackfella family didn't play country music. Alan Jackson and, Dolly Parton, Charlie Pride. Like, I grew up with all of that, and I know that music brings people together. Who would you say inspired you, or is there anyone, doesn't have to be, blackfellas, that you look up to or you really have connected with?
Oh, Mum and Dad. Mum listened to country music, a lot of country music, but Dad listened to a lot of jazz, actually. And, I as a little girl, I met Billy and Ella, and I wanted to be Sarah Vaughan when I grew up, and I wanted to marry Nat King Cole. But these people, it's not so far removed. I think, I love the way that they use their voice, their instrument to relay feelings of, incredible joy or really deep sorrow, or, Sarah Vaughan, her nickname was Sassy, And I loved that, you know, she was a bit cheeky when she was, like, she had this really sweet little girl voice, and then when she was speaking, and then when she'd sing, she'd blow you away. And I loved the power of that. I loved the way that it made me feel hearing these people. You know, they sing it like they mean it. And I think, you know, Guy and I have toured a number of times with Uncle Archie. He's been an incredible mentor and a really dear friend as well, and someone that, you know, has taken great lengths and really supported us in, you know, even though we're in different states, it's still, he's a wonderful, we've got a really wonderful connection with him, and I love his ability to just still a room, you know, not to be, it doesn't have to come out with bells and whistles, and it doesn't have to be anything too, like I've watched him with a guitar, and he has silenced a room with really simple songwriting and simple storytelling, because I don't think that our stories they don't have to be overly complicated. I don't think that we have to layer things up too much with words and effects. I think that our stories are strong as a starting point, and then our music is beautiful, and music's got a great way of conveying what words can't always say. I think that's you know, in terms of inspiration, I really love old jazz, and Archie, just a quick story, he used to always like we'd open for him, and then one night he stood up and he goes, you know, she reminds me of who's that singer? And I was sitting backstage thinking, oh, please say Sarah Vaughan, please say Ella Fitzgerald, please say Billie Holiday, you know. And he goes, oh, she reminds me of, oh, what's that girl's name? Edith Piaf. And I nearly died. And I thought, oh no. And he goes, no, because she takes this really old language and she sings it and makes it beautiful, and we can't help but fall in love with the romance of it. And I think there's something really deep about that what happens is the poet speaks, and the artist brings something forward, and people, you become captivated by these ideas, by these thoughts, and you know, and often when they're articulated, it's really obvious, but until the artist actually does that, it's not obvious at all. And I think that's really beautiful. They find the things that are otherwise hidden.
Of course. And I was just thinking about, it was really hard for my dad to get not Aboriginal music on radio, but that was quite easy. But Aboriginal music into the homes of non-Indigenous Australians, for them to hear the beauty of our people in terms of the musical talent, like with Uncle Archie, and you know when he used to sing with Annie Ruby, where she was a powerhouse, tiniest little thing, and could sing the house down. But there's all different people that I just keep thinking about. Like, I know Christine Anu, she kind of took Uncle George's song from Warumpi Band and My Island Home, and she kind of not modernised it, but it made it more contemporary, that more Australians actually know My Island Home, but they don't know that is a Warumpi Band song, right?
Yeah.
But for people to even pay to go to a concert to see Aboriginal musicians, I remember the Titters growing up at the Woodford Festival. I don't know, did you ever, because I know that you play at all different festivals, and I know that you're an ambassador for one of the folk festivals. I don't know, is that folk festival the Fairbridge Folk Festival? You're a patron of the festival. Is that in Australia?
Yeah, I am. Fairbridge Festival's WA's oldest festival, and they're terrific. They it's one of those festivals that's really family friendly, and often what happens is people come as artists and then they bring their kids because it's safe to bring your kids, and then the kids come. So you've got like generations of families that have been coming to this festival, and more recently, they've been looking to, make sure that Noongar language and culture, because it's on Noongar country, that's all infused, that it's not something unusual, but it's something that's expected because we're here and this is what we do. I think that's a really beautiful attitude, and the festival circuit is amazing. We more than because you can't. It's hard. Special radio don't know what to do with us because we sing in language, but because of the festivals, I think a lot of our stuff has been really highly accessible. We talk about, it is difficult to get to get airplane, to get into houses of non-Aboriginal people. But, Guy and I just did a season of opera entirely in Noongar language, and we sold it out. And so, that's a 1,200-seat venue for 5 nights. I think that there is a change, there is a shift.
There's an appetite.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I never give up hope. I'm always, we don't fight against, we always fight for. And I think that's, there is a shift in the air. Certainly where I live, there's a shift. And there's a lot of goodwill, and people are wanting, once upon a time, people wanted to just be entertained. They'd rock up to a show, and if you didn't play K-San, then they'd soon ask you for it. And then people wanted to come along and they wanted to feel something. So they wanted to feel like they were, I don't know what the word quite is, but there's a shift again now where people, they want connection. And I think this is really the cookie, because once we start to connect to one another, it's really hard to, it's that whole walk a mile in my shoes sort of stuff.
Yeah.
We don't owe any explanations. Like, where we are is because of what's happened. But there's a lot of people who actually do want to make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think, we've got to work with our allies. We've actually, the difficult things in our world, the difficult things in our communities and the histories that we have, they're not going away, and we need to respectfully remember that and to never forget the lessons from that, because there's lots of lessons. But we have present power to make change. And I think, it's a bit like being in a garden. You get so busy pulling out the weeds that you start to forget how to actually nurture the plants that are growing. And so I think music is a great way of just going, yep, I'm going to shine light on some things, but also I want you to come and sit at our campfire. I want you to be part of this. Archie said something really profound one day. We were sitting back after a gig, and he goes, we've all come from the same campfire. We're all just trying to find our way back. And I think there's something in that. We're not so different, all of us.
And
but it's finding ways to, if not to, we don't necessarily have to hold people's hands and drag them back, but certainly by being signposts and just going, you need to go this way.
Yeah, of course.
I think that's the cookie.
And just like those wise words from Uncle Archie, right? Just imagine if every school had an elder in residence, Gina. Just imagine.
Yeah.
We make up 3% of the population, so that's not going to happen, because 50% of our population, I'm not too sure if our listeners know this, but 50% of the Indigenous population are under the age of 25, and 40% of those are under the age of 15. A third of our population are enrolled in school. So, you put that half of our population, 1.5%, to the side, because they're basically all children, and the other 50% of our population, 30% are sitting in prison. So when we talk about elders or, people in our community that have that lived experience and not just wisdom, but it's lived experience, to be able to share with the younger generation. And like you said, I'm a big believer in bringing people along with us. At the same time, you know, we shouldn't be left with this huge responsibility of educating the masses in this country when we make up 3% of the population. So it's a big job, right, to try and bring on 97%, but they still need us. They need us to give them context of why we need them to begin with, or why it's important to learn about their history in this country, not Aboriginal history, Australian history.
Yeah.
So what can we do if you don't mind sharing with our listeners, what are some practical things that people can do? Like I always say, you know, to people, I deliver training, and I say to people, look, you can jump on LinkedIn if you want to engage with more Indigenous professionals and businesses. You can jump on Instagram. You'll find more black fellas there in terms of businesses. You can listen to a podcast, and then I say, well, I've got one. But what would you say to people that are listening to this podcast and are thinking about, you know what, I would love to be an ally, or I would like to contribute to positive change in this country?
Yeah, look, I think, you know, invest in First Nations literature. You know, there's a really good starting point. Read the books of the authors of this country, because they're telling their stories and they're important and they should be heard. I think, you know, go to community events, not just NAIDOC Week and stuff, but actually look around at your local government. I don't know what the situation's like in Queensland, but certainly in Western Australia, local government are quite active, and one of the things that they do really well is they'll run sort of like what do they call them? Well, they do language. You can go and learn language through local government, and you can also, you know, and they work with the local elders as well. So they've already done all the hard work. You can go into an environment that's really safe, and you can learn. And I think language, you can't separate language from culture. So wherever possible, if you have an opportunity to learn the language of the land on which you're living, then that's a really good starting point, I believe.
Well, I love the fact that you said that's the starting point, because some people just don't know where to start, right?
Yeah, I think that's the start. You know, Guy and I, throughout the year, we do what do you call it? We do language singing workshops, and we'll do that, you know, we do that 4 times a year. No, it's more than that. We do it 6 times a year. And everyone's welcome. Like, it's not, you know, and we give you a booklet. We talk about each week, over the 4 weeks, you do we cover one of the 4 principles. And at the end of it, we get people to invite their family and their friends, and we put on a little concert for them so that people can show you what we've been doing, and we can break bread afterwards, and we can enjoy each other's company. And, you know, it's amazing how many people come to this, and there's something beautiful about singing together. And I think, you know, there's lots of local choirs that are working with language and stuff. I think that, you know, getting involved with and it doesn't mean that you have to take it over. You don't have to drive the bus. You can just turn up and sit in the corner.
You don't have to drive the bus. I love that.
Because that's part of it. You know, the other thing is that we're still figuring this stuff out. We don't have all the answers. And, you know, it's like when you're learning to dance. You know, when you turn up and you're given you've got your partner there that you're dancing with, and sometimes you step on each other's toes, and sometimes it really hurts. But it doesn't mean that you give up on practicing the dance. And I think, well, you know, we've only been allowed in the dance hall for the last just over 50 years. And we've come in and we've got all these deadly dance moves that we want to show people, but at the same time, we're still figuring out the choreography a little bit. And I think that, you know, what often has happened historically is that, you know, well-meaning, we call them Nidiyang, well-meaning non-Aboriginal people will come along and they get a head full of steam, and suddenly they run off with our IP and stuff. And that's, you know, and that all they're trying to do is help us to amplify our message, but we have to be steering the bus. We have to drive the bus. So, you know, I reckon learning 5 words of the language of the land, that's your starting point. Then, you know, ask around, find out who the mob is locally and make friends. You know, offer to buy someone a coffee or you know, not necessarily turn up and ask for a cup of tea, but like often when we're sharing food and things, that you can get to know a person more by a campfire than you ever will in a boardroom, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And now you got to throw the online kind of Zoom virtual room, the Zoom room in now that we're all, due to COVID, that we're all kind of connecting now online. And, you know, that to me, there's pros and cons, right? Like you got to do what you got to do to kind of hopefully keep your head above the water or to keep, you know, food on the table. Do you do anything online? Because I am on the other side of the country, my sister. If there's anybody listening that wants to, if they wanted to do any of those workshops, I'm assuming they're all face-to-face, yeah?
Yeah, they are. We Guy and I shy away from the online platforms a little bit. You can get our music online. We're on Spotify and we're on iTunes. And, you know, if you look us up, if you Google us, we're not hard to find. So you can certainly experience what we do. But I like the intimacy of that personal interaction. I like the connection that you make. So we don't, you know, I'd much rather make friends than followers.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think it's more real. Otherwise, it doesn't. I don't know how to. I don't quite know what to do with myself online, to tell you the truth. If we were to do, go down that.
You look at yourself a lot. You start to find.
Yeah.
You're kind of confronted with, oh my God, is that how I look?
Yeah.
I think it's made me more self-conscious being online every day.
Yeah, and I think it comes with its own set of, you know, I think that down the track we're going to look at this and there's going to be, I don't know, I'm nervous about giving away what I can't take back, and online platforms are rife with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can do it. There's an online Noongar language course that people could do. And I'm not suggesting anyone off-country does that, but if you're Noongar and you're living off-country and you're interested in language, Curtin Uni has a free course that you can learn the language, and it's beautiful, and it's a really, you know, like it's a really good course. And that's, you know, something that people can do. I'm sure that there'd be other languages and things, you know, around the country where you could do similar things. I guess it's just about being a bit proactive as well, you know, and doing a bit of your own homework on this and finding opportunities.
Of course, it's not that hard when you've got the internet. You can Google a lot of the things that you're trying to look for, and there's resources like apps. You know, you can download like Welcome to Country, and it will tell you whose country you're on, you know, in the moment. So there's a whole lot of things that people can do. Gina, I was going to share with you, I was on LinkedIn 2 days ago, and one of my sister girls, big shout out to Jolene. Jolene's from over in WA. And
Jolene Hicks.
Jolene Hicks, my titter, yes.
Yeah.
And she shared something, and it was lovely. It says, one day I will be an ancestor. And I have to say, she reshared this from another titter girl from the NT, Nicole Brown. One day I will be an ancestor, and I want my descendants to know that I used my voice so that they could have a future, by Autumn Peltier. I reposted it and I said, I'm going to share a piece from my late grandmother, Maureen Watson. So I want to share this with you and also with my listeners. She taught us. Love that. You ready for this one?
Go on.
She taught us to look past the racism, injustice, lies and greed. She taught us to look past those things, to look for the goodness inherent in every person, the goodness we all share when we dream of clean air and water as the essential birthright of every child, regardless of race, colour, creed or country. how all of us, individually, collectively and globally, can empower ourselves to become honourable ancestors to our future generations by bequeathing them a healthy Mother Earth. And I just, every now and again, I Google my gran and I find her poetry or writings. And when I kind of seen your book and then I Googled you and I'm like, I remember playing your music on the radio at 98.9 FM. So I have never met you, but I felt that I already knew you, and that's what happens when you kind of grow up in a family that's kind of been in media my whole life in terms of surrounded by, you know, the radio and Aboriginal musicians and artists. You feel like you know people and you may not have ever met them before, and I think that's the beauty of music. It can bring us closer together, and we can connect through, you know, the stories or the music. You might not even be singing. It could just be instruments that you know, feel at peace with. And I think that if there was more beautiful people like yourself in this world, and there are a lot of people, but I just would encourage a lot of our listeners to, you know, get onto Spotify, get onto iTunes, go onto YouTube and, you know, have a look, do some research, find some Aboriginal musicians and talent, because it's not just all Jessica Mowboy and Baker Boy, which I love. My kids play Baker Boy because he sings in his language, but they're, you know, there's a whole generation who have paved the way, right, for the younger generation.
Yeah, I think, you know, and look, I think the biggest mistake we often make is that there's not enough room for everybody, and you know there's heaps of room, and you know I'm always in awe of the breadth and the depth of Aboriginal artists, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists, and they span all the genres and they span all corners of this amazing country that we call our home, and yeah, you're right. It's not hard to find it. The other one is to, you know, subscribe to podcasts like this and to tune into your local First Nations radio station. The community stations they punch so far above their weight. I was heavily involved with Noongar radio in, you know, when I came back I lived out of Perth. I lived down south for a long time, and then when I came back to live in Perth, I worked back at Noongar Radio, and you know the depth of talent is exceptional. Like, it's really extraordinary, and they've got. It's not just good music though. It's, you know, you learn about people from their lyrics, and you learn the stories, and I think that's really powerful as well. And they often have people come in and yarn up on radio, and I think that's really beautiful as well. And I think community radio kind of gets a bit of a raw deal in that it's not often well supported.
Yeah.
But they really work hard to deliver quality broadcasting. Certainly, you know, and I don't want to run the commercial networks down either, because there's a place for that, but a lot of it, you can't tell the difference. It all sort of sounds the same to me.
It does. We wasn't allowed to listen to anything but 98.9 FM or Koori Radio in Redfern. We weren't allowed to listen to anything but that. And I would say that, you know what, a lot of us younger, and you don't even have to be young to kind of like, you know, the R&B or pop and rock and reggae, but our music, like, I just feel that that's a way that people can really get to know us and connect with us and see that we're just like them. We're just people at the end of the day. And there's some deadly musicians and artists and actors and playwrights and podcasters. Like, we are in every industry doing amazing things, but mainstream media and I don't know if, you know, commercial radio do their best to amplify Indigenous voices. I think they could do better.
I think they're governed by completely different values to community radio.
Of course, it's all about money, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think it's difficult to compare the pair because they're not really, they're quite different animals. But, I think, again, it's great when, like, one of the biggest subscriptions in Perth happens to be for community radio. I think that really tells you something, when people start to lock in, it's powerful. And I think if you want to know about the community particularly, then your local community radio stations are a good starting point as well. Go learn language. Go sing some songs. Go to a concert. Go support your local Indigenous art.
Yeah.
Buy a painting or
buy a book such as yours.
Buy a book. Go on to Magala Books website.
Give somebody a book, because Magala Books in Broome in WA, there's a very few, would you say, First Nations publishing houses or companies?
They're one of the only ones, I think, certainly in Australia.
Yeah.
I can't think of another one that deals, is and it's certainly the oldest in terms of, what they do.
But there's Black Ink, but I don't know if Black Ink is an actual First Nations business.
Yeah, I know that Magabala absolutely is, and it's community run as well. So it's all that they do an amazing job, and they take a punt on different authors as well. I mean, I never expected that Magabala Books would publish. I've been a big fan of them for a long time, and I never expected that they would be keen to publish sheet music. Like, I would have thought that we would have had to have tried to peddle this to someone.
Like some kind of like orchestra, like symphonies, orchestras? What are they, conservatorium? What are they called, music concerts?
Totally got it. They were just, when I said to them, I said, we get a lot of requests from schools and from community choirs. They were like, that's fantastic. Let's run with it. And they really, and not just that, but they actually presented it in the most, it's beautiful. I don't know if you've got a copy of the book.
I did get a copy of it.
Oh, you want to touch it. You want to look at it. It's beautiful. I couldn't get over. The guy and I looked at it and we were just like, man, we scrub up all right on that front cover there. They've done this really...
It is a beautiful cover.
Yeah, they presented it in the most remarkable, beautiful way. And, yeah, I feel really excited about it, actually. I love that there's language and translations and all the information that you would need to replicate what Guy and I do. I think that's legacy. That's all about, when Guy and I have, popped off the mortal coil in however many years' time, that people will still be able to pick this resource up and replicate what we've been doing.
Pretty deadly. And Magala Books was the ABIA Small Publisher of the Year in 2020, and they've published, obviously, Dark Emu. Most people know Dark Emu and Young Dark Emu by Uncle Bruce Pascoe, who I got to have on this podcast as well, I must say. But I love Annie Sally Morgan. She's got so many books, and her original book was My Place, and now she's got a lot of kids' books. Like, one is called Little Bird's Day, and another one I read was This Is Me. But there's one here, the Traditional Healers of Central Australia, the Nunkaries. They published that book, and Amberlin Queermullina's Living on Stolen Land book. Yep. And there's Bindi, and I know Bindi by Kiralee Saunders and Dub Leffler. That's won some awards. Like, I don't know what awards that they've won, but I keep up with it. And I also got this amazing book by Vincent Namatjira, who is the grandson, or could be even great-grandson, to Albert Namatjira. And at the Queensland Art Gallery, there was the Namatjira exhibition. And we used to take people through. I've got a tourism business. So here in Brisbane, we take anybody around Brisbane with an Aboriginal tour guide, and we're actually activating Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander public art. So that public art could be at the museum, the art gallery. It could be just out on the street where you see public art out on the street. So when I saw the Namatjira book straight away. I was like, I have taken people through the Namatjira exhibition, and that was Vincent Namatjira. Now there's the book. So it's awesome that there's people like Vincent Namatjira who has, he's an artist, and now he's got a book, because that education in particular, when it comes to our people, and Albert Namatjira, that old fella, was one of the first Aboriginal people to be granted citizenship or partial citizenship, but he was, jailed for sharing alcohol with his family because they were under the Act and he wasn't. And the only reason why they granted that old uncle citizenship was to tax the sale of his artwork.
Yeah, it's rotten, isn't it?
But through that exhibition, we're looking at, a whole kind of collection of, this is my grandfather when he met the Queen and handed her a painting for her 21st birthday. This is my grandfather now at the Opera House in Sydney. So there was these big, huge portraits of different times of his grandfather's life.
Wow.
And people were just shocked. Everyday Australians were just shocked that this is, a part of our history. So through art, we tell stories through our tourism business. But I just love the fact that Magala Books, whether it's your Bruce Pascoe's or your book or these children books by, Vincent Namatjira or Sally Morgan, there's so many to choose from. You just have to go on their website and have a look, and maybe gift somebody a book this year for Christmas, or even for birthdays, give somebody a book, because sometimes it's not easy to have these conversations. So I just want to say thank you for jumping on this podcast and yarning with me about your book and about your music and about your career and about everything that we've been talking about. And I know that the radio stations that play our music, so a big shout out to Bumabipera Media in Cairns that play Black Magic Woman podcast. I'm pretty sure Cherbourg Radio play Black Magic Woman podcast as well. So maybe we'll try and get the Black Magic Woman podcast on some of the radio stations over there on Noongar country.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
No worries at all. Well, sis, thank you so much. I will let you go, and I just want to say that it's been an absolute pleasure to yarn with you, and I look forward to seeing where you're playing it next when the borders open.
Yeah, we're really excited actually. There's some talk about some interstate touring next year, and our opera we're looking to tour interstate as well in the next couple of years' time. So watch this space. We're definitely heading your way.
Too deadly. All right, my sister. Well, thank you so much once again. And, like I said, I look forward to meeting you when you're on the East Coast. Give me a call.
Will do. Younger. Thank you.
Too deadly. How deadly was that? Like, literally speaking to somebody that I've listened to growing up in a family that's been heavily involved in the media, and in particular in Aboriginal media and Aboriginal radio. If you know my family, I've heard of my family, you know that my dad, Tiger Bowers, was a pioneer in Indigenous media and helped set up the National Indigenous Radio Service, or NIRS, which has about 130 Aboriginal community radio stations on a network, a satellite, right across this country. So maybe if you want to, Google NIRS and have a look if there's an Aboriginal radio station that you can tune into from wherever you are in this country, and also via the wide world web. And on the internet, you can also listen to a lot of those radio stations in terms of live streaming these days. So anyways, I just want to share with you that if you didn't know, Gina is an award-winning singer-songwriter and journalist, and has spent the past 3 decades committed to sharing stories and writing songs for her community, and with her collaborator and best friend, Guy Ghouse. Gina's accolades include 2018 Inductee of the West Australian Women's Hall of Fame, winner in the Aboriginal category, 2017 West Australian of the Year, and winner Indigenous Act of the Year, in 2013, 14, 15, 16 and 18 at the West Australia Music Industry Awards. She is an ambassador for the Australian Performing Rights Association and a member of the British Council's ACCELARATE Arts and Cultural Leadership Alumni. And we spoke about, she's also a patron of the Fairbridge Folk Festival, the longest running folk festival in WA. I really enjoyed that yarn and I hope you did too. So until next time, bye for now.
Don't forget to follow Black Magic Woman podcast on all social media platforms. To keep up to date with the latest episodes and news, head to blackmagicwoman.com.au. You can rate and review the podcast on iTunes, and please feel free to share the podcast with your family and friends.